to Create If Writing, the podcast for writers and creatives dealing with the passion and the practice behind making good art. I'm your host, Kirsten Oliphant, and you can find the show notes and more at createifwriting.com. In this episode, I am so excited to talk with Kevin Kaiser. Now, Kevin is not the household name you will know because he's not the person at the very front of the stage. He's the person behind the stage who is helping that person at the front of the stage figure out their vision, hone their craft, and know the direction to go. In this conversation, we talk about why there's no such thing as writer's block, the psychology that makes people click on a viral post, authentic art, and so much more. On today's episode of Create If Writing, I'm talking with Kevin Kaiser. How are you doing, Kevin?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad to have you here. And I feel like I don't even know where to start or even do a proper introduction for you because I feel like you have one of those kind of awesome nebulous titles. And I'm not even sure, you know what, maybe you should tell me your title because I was trying to decide like what is it? Because you do so many things and have done so many things. So I would love to, I'll just make this my first question really is I want to know a little bit about who you are, what it is you do and kind of how you got to where you are.
Okay. Well, that's a good question because I wonder that too most days. It's, well, let me give you kind of the 30,000 foot view of like, here's the history of Kevin Kaiser. So I grew up in southern Indiana, in this tiny little place called Georgetown, middle of three kids, and very much introverted. I was, the bookish kind that hung out in the woods with my brother, and went to college for business. And out of college, got into the investment world and worked my way up the corporate ladder, and then went into private practice. I was one of the youngest certified financial planners in the country at the time, and managing money and working with entrepreneurs and people, and all the while not really loving what I did. And so I would get up really early in the morning and write books, like really terrible stories. Right? I mean, I was a terrible writer. And I ended up meeting this guy named Ted Decker who lived in Colorado at the time, and we had common friends, and he had pulled me aside and we just became friends. And he said, I used to do what you do where, I was in business and then I would write on the side, and would you ever want to get involved in entertainment? And I was looking to get out of the investment world. So I had a business partner and we had some money, and our family left Colorado and moved to Nashville. This was about 8 years ago to start a media company with Creative Trust and Ted Decker. And I ran that, and we sold it after about a year. And then I freelanced and wrote comic books for a year. And then Creative Trust asked me to come back and be Ted Decker's manager because I have this mutant kind of brain where I'm kind of a jack of all trades. I do creative work. I can immerse myself fully in that. But then I also, because of my business background, understand how to use, creativity. And the way I define creativity really just being as the ability to connect dots, to kind of see the connections that other people don't see. And so I did that. And along the way, I learned a lot of really cool stuff, got to, advise publishers and musicians and Hollywood studios. And so I've done a little bit of everything, marketing, strategy, branding. I guess what I do now is, I officially parted ways with Creative Trust in fall of 2014, and really have just been consulting with individual creative entrepreneurs and corporations. It's kind of a mixed bag. Like recently I did a half-day workshop with a publicly traded healthcare company on corporate storytelling and the importance of narrative. And so there was a room that had 15 executives in it, and it really was all about the importance of connecting with each other as human beings. And within the first 20 minutes, there were grown men crying in the room, and I thought, oh, I love this. Like, this is perfect. So
I feel like you need to put that kind of like on a shirt or, it needs to be your slogan, like makes grown businessmen cry, that's got to be somehow involved in like your resume.
Yeah. Put it on the bumper sticker or something.
Yes. Hire me. I'll make your people cry.
But yeah, exactly. but I guess like defining, I've never really been into labels and job titles, and like people ask me, well, gosh, what are you? And it really just depends on the day, I guess my life is marked by being intensely curious about more things than I could ever learn about, and so that's made me a tinkerer, somebody who really just figures things out, and I've learned that it's a very unique blend of skills that not a lot of people have. That they're able to sit in a corporate boardroom and hold their own, but then also to go ghostwrite a novel. I don't know if I'm strange I'm definitely strange, but yeah, that's kind of my life.
Well, I wonder how many other creative people are out there kind of maybe nodding along, because so much of the time people sort of have this understanding of the creative person as somebody who's really artsy, really unorganized, not very business minded, not very practical. It's like that mad scientist kind of thing, but not a scientist, because that would be way too practical. So it's like the mad starving artist. And I think that's the idea people have of creative. And I think what you have kind of talked about is a much broader picture than that.
Yeah. Well, I think we live in a time where we don't, if you want to be in the creative business, you don't have the luxury of outsourcing the promotional or the relationship development side of the business, and that's really what it is. They call it show business for a reason, because there's a business around it, and it's I would argue that it's always been the artist's primary responsibility to be the primary champion for the work. And so it's our responsibility to, first of all, understand how the market works. And you do have to be a student of it, just like you have to be a student of your craft. I see the marketing side and the business side of creativity as being part of the creative process. It's not separate from it. It's actually part of the process itself. I kind of see it like, I'm looking at a glass. I have a glass of water sitting on my desk right now. And imagine that the world is thirsty and you have water, like you are water. But if you have water without any container, it's no good, right? Gravity takes over, it just kind of hits the ground. So you need a container to deliver the water in. And that container is, a business. It's the systems and the framework that we put in place to actually make a difference and to connect our water with the world's thirst. So I just view it as part of the process. And if you look at it that way, you can take joy in it. You can learn it. You can become a student of it, and you can you can be passionate about it in some way.
I think that's such a great perspective and very, very freeing, and also really very hopeful, because I think sometimes there's this sense that, it's just so easy to get caught up in numbers. And I feel like there was this myth for many years before we sort of moved into settled into the more digital age that we are in now. But there was a myth that for writers in particular, because that's sort of the area I'm in, I can't speak to some of the other areas of entertainment, but that in the writing world, the myth was that you got a book deal and the publisher did all the stuff and you just wrote, like you were in a room, you're writing, and that's it. Right. And I don't think that's ever really how it was, fully. I think there's a lot more to it, but I think now that there are the tools available for everybody to build a platform and to connect with readers and an audience, I don't know. I think people are having trouble with that shift because they're thinking like, no, my job as a writer is just to write. So all this other stuff is it's just business. Like they kind of chalk it down, like, or it's not something I want to do, or I'll just get published. I'm not going to self-publish. I'll just get published traditionally and they'll handle that for me. And that's still a myth, because that's not that's not how that works either today. But I see people kind of clinging to those old ideas, and in the sense that it is such a separation. And I love the way you talk about it not being a separate thing.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it started to change a little bit in the past year or two. I spent some time really immersed in the blogging world and going to blogging conferences and connecting with all these social media people. And I started to just find that really exciting. And so then when I kind of stepped out of that world and took a breath and stepped a little bit back into the world of writerly writers, I was like, oh, nobody enjoys this the way that I seem to enjoy it. And I think that they think of it as like a whole separate entity. But when I started to think about it as just connecting with people, and that maybe those people might read my words, it's kind of like you were saying, it's a framework. It's a point of connection. It's not, if you use that fancy word platform to think of like a job you have to do that's not very fun, then of course it's not going to be very fun. But if you think about it as you're building your readership, you're connecting with your people. I mean, all writers and creatives, you want to connect with people, right? Unless you're the person who wants to paint murals in your closet that no one ever sees. Yeah. I'm not sure how many of those people there are out there, but
probably more than you know.
Maybe I will never know, because they're doing it in their closet because they don't care. They don't want me to see it. They're doing it just for the sake of their art, I guess. But for the people who do want an audience, I think that's such an important shift that needs to take place, because I don't think we have a choice anymore. If we ever did, if that myth was at all true that publishers would just handle everything, or there was a third party you could outsource to, I think today more than ever, that's just not true.
Yeah.
And in your work, so did you find then that, there was any outsourcing, or is this really, the creative people's job to get their work out there? Because you worked for a company doing some of this. Were you doing the job for them or helping them do it better?
Yeah. Well, actually, let me back up a little bit and address some of the things you've talked about, because really, it used to be that an author's primary job was just writing. And there's this old adage in publishing, and it used to make sense. It was stack them high and watch them fly. And your primary job was, all you needed to do was get enough books into the bookstore, and you were basically guaranteed a bestseller. And especially if there was enough money behind it. And here's the reason why. TV is a really great example. So back in this, early 80s, something like 125 million people tuned in to watch the MASH. Remember MASH?
Yep.
The MASH finale. And it actually wasn't unusual for programs to draw 30, 40, 50, 100 million people. But there were only 3 networks, right? So you only had 3 choices. And the same went for how and where you bought books during the heyday. Well, now there are way more than 3 channels. So, our world has become increasingly fragmented. Like, everything has been digitized, and there is almost an infinite number of possibilities for us to consume whenever we log on. It's not just, TV or books. We're also competing against video games. Halo, when it came out, when this most recent one came out, it made something like $600 million in the first 48 hours, I think is what the figure was. And so it's, your competition is everybody and nobody, because there's so many choices now, right? And so now it's, what becomes premium is the same thing that's always been premium, which is the relationship, the connection with the audience. But the hard part is, how do you get the audience's attention when, there are a billion channels and there are, 8,000 or 7,000 marketing messages, whatever it is now, that we're barraged with every single day. And so, really the challenge is, how do you gain people's attention? How do you gain their confidence? And then how do you translate that into trust, and into an ongoing relationship? So, but when it came to, my job, as it had to do with authors and publishers, my primary job was, was helping them realize that, okay, the old way of doing things isn't going to work. You don't have enough money to buy people's attention anymore. Even if you have $200 million, it's not enough. And so my job really was convincing them to give me the budget that they were going to spend on doing a full-page USA Today ad, and use that to actually build the author's list, the author's brand, the relationship with the audience, because you can go back to that. Like, if you build relationship, you can go back to that. I can only run a USA Today ad once, right?
Yeah.
So, that was really my job.
Well, and I was thinking as you mentioned that the USA Today ad, and I guess you could do it online as well, but like, I think of things that are clickable, and if something's not clickable, I wonder how effective of an ad it is anymore. And and even online, we're so, as you said, there's so many choices. We're so inundated with seeing ads that I feel like in some ways we glaze over them. We don't see them anymore because we're so used to, well, that's the space an ad goes. So our eyes are trained almost to just not see it. Yeah. And, which is why some of those terrible, awful ads have the like flashing, like five fat busters, and it has like a really ugly photo. And I feel like that's so intentional because the pretty ads, like they flow right in. Oh, isn't that lovely? But like the ugly flashing ad that you see on somebody's site, you notice it because it's really ugly and moving. But just thinking about ads and relationship, and that's such a key thing. And I feel equal parts excited and hopeful, and also sort of depressed because again, there are so many people vying for relationships, and I feel like it can seem so daunting. There are so many channels and with all those choices, like where do you choose to put, your time and effort? Do you put it, there's so many platforms for social media. Every week there's a new one. What matters? Where do you see the changes? And so for you and your experience, and I know this may change from author to author or, situation, but where do you see the main kind of connections happening online?
Well, it really depends on the person. So going back to my investment days, so there's this guy, Benjamin Graham, and Benjamin Graham is, he's like known as one of the fathers of modern portfolio theory. And he's got this, he has this quote. It's a really famous quote. He says, "In the short run, the market is a voting machine, but in the long run, it is a weighing machine." And I think a lot of what we're seeing with online advertising and social media and like this drive for, likes and comments and, these sort of, it's a veneer of, it's the appearance of relationship when it's really not, right? So it's a voting machine. It's, hey, people really like this. And I did an experiment recently where I wanted to see if I could create a, quote, viral, like reverse engineer a viral article on Lifehack. And I basically got, I think it's up to like 238,000 shares now.
Wow.
And it's basically a clickbait, like, a listicle kind of thing. And I just wanted to see, the psychology behind it. Does it actually work? And how does it actually impact people versus what Benjamin Graham says, which is in the long run, the market is a weighing machine, that which has substance will win in the end. Because I think ultimately that is really what resonates with people. I think about the folks online that I point to and I think, man, I really want to emulate that. I think of people like Austin Kleon, Maria Popova from Brain Pickings, or, like him or hate him, Tim Ferriss. I think he is, all of these people are they're very true to what and who they are. And it's not for everybody, and they're not trying to be for everybody. And I think we live in this time where there's this illusion, or maybe even like this sense of entitlement that I need to get mine. I need to get my internet fame. I need to grab my 15 minutes of fame. Well, you can do that and you can engineer your way into that. I've seen people do it. I've helped people do it. I'm ashamed to say, but that's not what lasts. And you can do that, but ultimately you won't have any impact and you'll be quickly forgotten. I mean, we'll all be forgotten, 20 years, 50 years after we die. But while you're here, or at least while I'm here, I want to do things that I feel are excellent. They are a true and accurate and authentic incarnation of the truth and the beauty that I want to put into the world. And often what that means is that that's not going to be commercial. That is not going to be what gets 1 million clicks. And you have to be okay with that. At some point you do. Either that or you decide, I'm not going to be okay with that. I'm going to play the game no matter what, because my goal is to be rich and famous.
Well, and then there's that balance too, because even if you don't want to be rich and famous, but you're supporting your family, there's that, kind of need to, of course, we want to find all of us. We all want to find that sweet spot of being authentic, making our art and what makes us feel purposeful, but also supporting our life, whether you're a single person or a person supporting a family. And that's what I think is really a struggle, is trying to figure out how to do that, how to do the work without selling your soul, how to support yourself without selling your soul. Yeah. And some people just maybe are in it for money, and that's, that's their goal. Like I'm not, that's not going to be my goal necessarily, but if that's their goal in some way, I guess they're being true to themselves and, doing.
Yeah. Well, and it's not right or wrong. It's just different paths,
Yeah.
I think one of the beauties of living in the time that we do is that we have options, and really you're only limited by your imagination, your willingness to learn new things, and your willingness to try new things. So Dave Corbett has this concept called the portfolio life. And I know Jeff Goins talks about it as well on his blog about how, if you think of your life as, this pie chart, and there are multiple ways that you can create value and resources for your life, time and money being, two of the primary ones. And we do live in a time where you can learn that stuff. You can learn how to, even while you're in a full-time job, do your writing on the side, build your empire on the side, and have the opportunity and the choice to make the leap if you want. I mean, I always advise people, if you have a full-time job, stick with it. It's actually a competitive advantage, because you don't have to, you're not worrying about, okay, well, how am I going to feed my family next month? And I've been that guy, and it's not fun to have, to be in that position.
I feel like sometimes that stress can very much negatively impact the art. It makes me freeze.
Yeah.
I realized this is sort of similar, but in college, it took me until my senior year to realize how I wrote papers best. I was an English major. So, I wrote any number of papers at all times. I was writing a paper. Every week there was a paper somehow. But what I realized is that if I wrote the paper way ahead of time, which is not, I don't always think of myself as an ahead of time person, but if I wrote the paper and gave myself like 2 days before the paper was due, so if I finished it 2 days before, I wrote the paper fast, I wrote it well, and it was easy. Mm-hmm. The papers that I, planned, I think the way a typical college student does, which is, when it has to be done. And so you definitely get it done by that point.
Yeah.
Those are the times when the stress of knowing it's due in 12 hours, instead of spending what took me maybe an hour or two to get something on paper, I mean, it would take me all night. Mm-hmm. I would pull those all-nighters where you're, running to 7-Eleven to grab Mountain Dew and coffee and Twizzler, anything that you can, because the stress of knowing that deadline was coming and I couldn't slow it down made me freeze, even in those kinds of papers. So there's something definitely true about that stress level. And so that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like for me, it's really hard. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and it's really, really hard to find the time and to be able to write and to do some of the things I'm really passionate about. But at the same time, I have the freedom, and it's such a luxury because my husband works and provides so that I'm not having that. Now that, because we're on one income, it means we also, cut corners in a lot of places, but that's fine. We're happy to do that. That's where we are. But it seems like a luxury to me to not have the pressure of knowing if I don't sell something and if I don't have, 10,000 people on my email list that we're not going to eat this month. So that freedom is really important. Yeah,
sure. And I think, let me make a comment about the, staying up all night and, being able to create and do a lot of work in a really short amount of time. I think that that's because you actually turn off your brain in a way. And there's this great book called Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, which is he's a University of Chicago. I think he's a psychologist, and he's kind of the preeminent scientist who started this idea of creative flow and what does that actually look like. And then, Stephen Kotler kind of took his ideas and built it out with a book called The Rise of Superman, studying extreme athletes and people that get into a state of flow. And especially those who, if they don't get into a state of flow, they are going to die. So, and what they found is that actually what's happening is you are something in the brain turns off so that your creativity can actually flow. So you get out of your own way. And at least that's been my experience and the experience of people that I've worked with is when you get put into a situation where there's no other option, then, you have to make it work. Then it's easier to get hyper focused. And that's when things really start to flow, and time disappears and you look back and you go, oh my gosh, how did I do that? How did I write 5,000 words in 2 hours?
And I've definitely had, as much as the all-nighter and the last-minute deadline stuff, that stress does shut me off in a bad way. I've also had times where I have these sort of self-imposed deadlines and I sort of am able to, like you said, push through and do something more than I thought. So, I think and I'd be interested to read some of those works to see, is there something that's universal? Because I do feel like we all have such a different process. And the most, the best thing that you maybe can do for yourself as a writer or creative is to find your process. Yeah. And I think it takes some trial and error. But if you can find, I found I was enjoying writing papers more, doing better, and doing them in less time if I wrote them ahead of time. For me in college. And so, of course, you figure that out the last semester of your senior year, right. But, just in time for you to finish up. But, thinking about what your goals are and how you can accomplish them, how you best work will save some of that time and stress and keep you in that creative flow. But I'd be really interested to look at that book too and see what universal kind of things are, going on in our brains with regards to creativity. Yeah.
Well, I think most of it really comes down to fear. I mean, many years ago, I decided that writer's block really does not exist. Writer's block is a story that we tell ourselves when we are afraid. We're either afraid that, at least for me, I can only speak for myself. I'm blocked when I'm afraid that I don't have what it takes, that people are going to ridicule it, that they're not going to like it, that I suck. And that's what gets me blocked. When I'm in a space where I'm able to let go of the need to be validated by whatever that work ends up being and just kind of let it be whatever it is, that's when things loosen up. And that's when, you don't have any expectation of, or any need for it to be really great. It's just going to be what it's going to be. And I think too that is actually rooted, at least for me, in this idea that creativity doesn't really depend on us. It's not like, we're trying to push a boulder up a mountain. I think that's a very romantic notion, kind of the tortured artist. But I think really creativity is more about, it's about connecting dots. It's about being an antenna. And there's more than enough creativity in the world. There is inspiration everywhere. It's almost like an ether. It's almost like you're constantly walking around being bombarded with inspiration and things that are just wonderful and amazing and mysterious. And the only thing that's necessary to to capture it is just to be an antenna, like to be open and to actually look and see the world, not just glance at it, but like actually be present to it, see it, and just see what happens. I think that's the really mysterious part of creativity. And we try and like package it into, 7 steps to, the perfect creative life. But I don't think it works that way.
Well, it's too bad because I was really hoping that you would just give us a formula for, figuring this all out and having the creative stuff down and selling all of our books. But
yeah, I'll tell you what it is. No, I won't.
No, tell me.
I'll keep it to myself. Yeah, if I knew that, oh man, I'd be so rich.
Well, that would really be something to put on a business card, right? Would be, I absolutely know the truth about how to do all these things. But I feel like the thing that's been getting me down lately is really, I feel like, and I mentioned this before, like, I feel like I'm often equal parts hope and despair about a lot of things. There are so many possibilities, and then you're like, oh, there's too many, like there's so many possibilities. There's a place for me. There's so many possibilities. I'm going to get lost. And so I really like I feel like I've been listening to a lot of podcasts and reading a lot of blogs from these entrepreneurs who are so optimistically encouraging, and I think of like Amy Porterfield. I've been loving her podcast and just talking about things like copy and talking about just doing your best work and connecting with people. And it's really encouraging. And then at the same time, and she's not one of them, but when you go online, I feel like now the more I've been connecting with some of those people, I feel like everybody is doing that same thing and selling. And again, I do not mean Amy Porterfield because she's kind of awesome and I really like her a lot, but there are, every other blog I hit has like I'm selling this and I know how to tell you to do that. And, one I got recently was an email list. And I like to sign up for email lists too. I've said this in another episode, but I love signing up for email lists to see what people give you. And not just the free thing, but to see what they send, because I find that very interesting, what people are sending. And there was one that was like Twitter strategies for authors. And it was all about how to use Twitter. And I find I love Twitter, but it is a place for me to connect. It is not a place where I get a lot of clicks or hits or anything else. It's just a place where I connect really well with people. But it doesn't sell things for me. And so I signed up for something, and it was a series of videos on how to use Twitter to sell like 1 billion copies of your book. I'm sure that's not the number, but it was like, how to make a bestseller.
It should have been 1 billion.
It could have been 1 billion, your bestseller on Twitter. And I was listening and I was just kind of like, no, I don't know. I don't know that this guy like honestly did these things because these are things that people do all the time, that I do all the time and other people do. And I feel like I get Twitter and again, like have good connection, but these things would not really work. Yeah. And so, you sit there and you wonder, did this guy have a weird experience? Did he make it up? And somebody like Tim Grahl would say he made it up. I don't know if you are familiar with Tim Grahl, but, he's got a great book called Your First 1,000 Copies, and it's excellent. And he just says that flat out, a lot of people are just selling lies, things that don't actually work. They're selling, and the question I kind of come away with, so I get frustrated. That's where I get in despair because I'm like, I'm so tired of being sold these programs or people trying to sell me these programs of like the formula, the magic formula that's going to get you what you want, whether that's, selling books or having your blog be insanely awesome and everybody goes to it, or whatever it is that you're trying to do. They're all selling it to you. And I get really frustrated. And I feel like it does cloud, the people who are true experts who really do have some value to offer. I feel like it gets really muddy in there because everybody's down in there trying to tell you how to do that. And so a question I want to ask you, I've heard you talk about this idea of the 1,000 true fans. And, I talked with Chad Allen earlier this year about publishing, and he talked about 10,000 people on your email list kind of being a number that tends to get publishing people to pay attention. And then there's, I think it's Nick Stevenson, and he talks about having your first 10,000 readers, and he has a course on that. Is there a number, like, is there a magic number that we need that we can, that you can, as a writer or I guess particularly a writer, but is there some kind of magic number out there, Kevin, that you know about that we need to have?
777.
Super, writing it down.
No, I mean, it's a legit question. And so I can only tell you let me give you kind of the operating system answer. And here's what I mean by operating system. I like to think of how we are in the world as, think of like your mobile phone, and you can get apps for your mobile phone, right? So apps for checking the weather, or apps to help you be more productive, or, to make your life better in some way, some specific way. And apps are great. Like, we need apps. But actually what I'm interested in is, what is an operating system that helps me see the world and organize the world in a way that really makes sense, and in a clear way. And so I think the operating system that works for me, the way I see the world, is that Benjamin Graham was right. In the long run, it's about the market is a weighing machine, and in the short run, it's a voting machine. And popularity fades. Relationships matter. And the number of relationships that you need to make a living from anything really is smaller than you think. Like you mentioned, Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fans concept. And that was from a 2008 blog post that he wrote. And I advise everybody, if you've never read it, it's just go to kk.org, or just Google 1,000 True Fans, Kevin Kelly, and you'll read it, and you'll find it. But I personally know people who have made, this year, 6-figure incomes with fewer than 500 fans, 500 people. Now, you obviously have to be very specific about what you're providing, the value that you're providing, because you're talking about, multi-$100 or $1,000 plus kinds of products. But, for that specific thing that they're doing, they don't need a lot of people to actually buy. Now here, you have to work backward a little bit, and I'll give you a number. So I have lots of friends who are in the information product business. They sell courses, and I've asked them all the same thing. It's, what % of your list actually buys? And it's somewhere between 0.5% and 2%.
Wow.
So let's just say it's 1%. Okay. So if you have 1,000 fans, you can expect 10 people to buy out of that 1,000 on average. And so how many people do you need to make a sustainable living? Well, just do the math. And almost everybody says, everything changed for me when I hit 10,000 followers or 10,000 subscribers that I had some real connection with. So they opened my email when I sent it. And then that's when things change. So if you can get to 10, I think 10,000 is a good target, but you want 10,000 of the right people. Yeah. You don't just want 10,000 people. Don't go out and buy Twitter followers, because that's stupid. Yeah. But like, if you're an author, can you make a living off of 100 people? Probably not. Unless you're doing other things like, writing, doing some kind of live events, or, you do these awesome packages where people are paying $1,000 or $500 for your work. Yeah. So it's, on that front, it's a numbers game. Mm-hmm. So the more you can do to build trust and gather people, the better. So building trust and gathering people. That sounds like, for people out there that are afraid of this idea of building platform, or don't, it sounds, and I'll be honest, like 10,000 to a lot of people, I think will sound just so daunting. But if it's about building trust and gathering people, if you think of it in that way, instead of like numbers, instead of thinking of it as some kind of weird robotic motion that you're performing, it sounds so much better. It sounds so much more manageable. Yeah. Well, and you don't have to, go from 0 to 10,000 in a year. Oh, right? Good. Oh, good. So, yeah, so you just have to be focused on, okay, now let me take the next right step. I'm not a huge fan of, everybody talks about big, hairy, audacious goals. I think those are great, but most people, they're so ambitious that they will actually never hit any of those goals because they're too big to be real. And so I always tell people, shoot really low. Like, don't worry about 10,000 fans. Don't worry about 1,000 fans. Like, get 10 people. Can you get 10 people on your email list this week? That's 2 a day, and, we get, I think there's something like 3 billion emails sent every day. I mean, think about how many emails you get or send every day.
Yeah.
Well, what if in your email signature you put, hey, did you know I have a novel? Link it to your subscribe page. And, if you send 100 emails in a day or 100 emails in a week, if you got 1%, that'd be one person. And it's just little things like that. It's, you don't have to, butcher the whole elephant and shove it down your throat right now. Just, one bite at a time.
Yeah.
And that's doable, but you won't be an overnight success. It's a methodical, patient, slow build. And that's actually what you want. You really don't want the overnight success, because overnight successes typically don't last.
Well, and, I think about, sort of that idea of the slow build as being, something that is manageable for people. Because the thing about overnight success as well, other than sometimes, and we do have this happen, I think, now with the internet and things being viral, but the people that are like what we would call overnight successes, if you've ever watched, like they don't make them, I guess, probably anymore, the VH1 Behind the Music for people. The people that we often see as overnight successes, well, they've been working really hard for a number of years. They just weren't in the public spotlight. You didn't see the work.
Yeah.
You didn't see that Taylor Swift moved her family to Nashville so that she could write music for other people when she was like 14. And, that there was all this work that was going in behind the scenes for someone like her. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, she exploded. Well, no, she did, but she didn't.
Yeah. Well, I'll never forget at the... this was a couple years ago at the Grammy Awards when, do you remember, the band Fun? And they got up and they won for Best New Artist. And the guy was like, yeah, so we've been around for like 10 years. And we're not exactly new, but
thanks.
Hey, it's new to you, so thanks.
That's really funny.
It's exactly that, though. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember there was a story about, I always liked this MC Hammer when he was first starting out, and there, he was, I guess, selling out in clubs and selling CDs out of the trunk of his car. And a record executive came to him, supposedly. Now, this is not verified. This is from, watching some TV show. So don't hold me to, this is absolute truth. But as the story goes, he was approached and the record executive offered him a figure, and he kind of laughed and was like, I make more selling CDs out of the trunk of my car. It was probably tapes, actually. I make more selling tapes or real records. Yeah. Out of the trunk of my car than what you just offered me. There is all this behind the scenes work that people don't see, when that comes. And so, if you seem like an overnight success, but you really have that slow build, then that's maybe okay. But, some of these viral posts and, they don't necessarily have the lasting value. Now, I have a question about your viral post. So you had that post that was shared over 200,000 times. Have you seen anything for you that will be sort of long-term from that? Yeah,
it was just kind of well, and I did it not expecting anything to come of it, really, because it's all, it's a numbers game. So if 238,000 people shared it, chances are that, who knows how many people actually saw it?
Yeah.
Because only a fractional percentage of people they're going to share it. So I think I had a couple hundred people sign up for my email list because of that. But no lasting value. Here's one of the really interesting things about especially clickbait kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And this is the psychology behind sharing. People don't share things because they necessarily think they're good. Although that's a component. People share things because of what they think it says about them. And so, the post was about, 20 things. I forget exactly what the title was, but it was, highly creative people, like 20 traits of highly creative people. And people share that because they want their friends to see those traits and go, oh yeah, well, Joe's highly creative. Joe, this is totally you. I'm glad you shared that. So it validates some insecurity in them, really. And I mean, that's just kind of the way that stuff works. It's just psychology. But, you know, when people share that, are they interested in going and signing up for an email list? No. I mean, their primary reason for hitting the button is, hey, I want so-and-so to know, without me having to really say it, that I'm highly creative.
Yeah.
It's the same reason why people buy Apple products over, you know, like an Android or, you know, Windows, like a HP laptop, because there's a certain stigma. Like it says something about who you are and why you have that, and not, you know, like the Mac and PC commercials, if you remember those.
I do.
It's like that's the perfect example. It's identity through possessions.
Well, and I can say, you know, I always heard this sort of myth that Macs are more secure. And so we have a couple of them. Although, you know, when I had money to buy, I needed a new computer. I had money and I looked at Macs and I was like, oh yeah, I can afford like 1/4 of a Mac, or I can buy
two computers.
PC, a PC and a printer and all these programs that I need to run it. And so I did that. But I do have a Mac right now. That was my husband's sort of, it's only a couple of years old, but for whatever work reasons, he got a new one. And so I got to have his, and it absolutely crashed to the degree that the Apple Store could not get any of my files off. And there was that was my latest like deal this month, was learning to be peaceful if I lost all my files. And I found a friend who I did not know was a computer genius. And apparently the computer genius people don't tell people, because everyone asks them when that happens. So I kind of put out a call on Facebook that was like, help, my life might be over the end, you know. And he called me and was like, hey.
And the internet saved you.
The internet did save me. Absolutely. But it was a relationship, not a stranger. So, you know, back to that connection idea. But yeah, so Macs, as wonderful as they are, the rumor about them not crashing or getting viruses is false. Because I also got a virus that same week on my backup computer, which is a Mac. So yes, stigma and saying something about people. Something this week that was funny to me, because I think people also really share, you know, well, I don't know. I'm not sure what. Maybe you can pinpoint this. I shared something because I love this, but there was a guy this week that had crocheted like the very first level map from Super Mario Brothers 3.
Oh, awesome.
And he made this giant, you know, crocheted, and it's perfect. It's beautiful. And it's like crocheted, and it took him 6.5 years, which I didn't. And the funny thing is, I didn't read the article. I just saw the picture and was like, this is amazing. And so I shared it. And that's the most engagement I've had in like a month on my Facebook page, because other people, the same thing, it got shared and shared and shared because people just loved it and thought it was pretty amazing. And so I think it'd be a fun thing to do to have do a study of what is shareable exactly. And the return on it. I think that's interesting that you got 100 or so, or a couple hundred, I guess you said, email subscribers.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one thing it's kind of my mantra now is, like, everybody, I mean, for years and years and years, we've been talking about truth in marketing, right? And I think truth as marketing is really always the best path. But we know and we feel authenticity when we experience it, when we come across it. You can't fake presence. You can't fake like that. Stephen Colbert called it truthiness, but you know, like talking about fake truth, but I'm talking about like authenticity. You can't, like, people can sense when you're being plastic.
Yeah.
And so don't be plastic, you know?
Yeah. I think you can sustain it for a short period of time, because I've seen that in my life where, you know, certain people, like there's a charisma or some kind of thing that they put off in there, that fake authenticity that can fool people, but only for so long.
Yeah.
You know, or if you keep them at a distance enough. And I've seen that a little bit, but I think overall you're right. Like you can't fake authenticity. And I think once you do fake it, you lose that trust that you talked about as being so important. And then you can't recover that. It's gone. Mm-hmm. And so if that's sort of the currency is your trust, you know, you don't want to lose that. You want to be authentic so that you're not, you know, making all that currency worthless and in that relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, and it's, you shouldn't have to get up in the morning and have to think about, okay, now who was I yesterday? Because I got to be sure I've got my story straight. You know?
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah. So you, like here's a surefire way to keep your story straight is, well, gosh, I mean, don't make it up. Like, just be who you are. And who you are, honestly, is going to change too. I mean, I've seen it because everybody talks about brand and reputation and, you know, being known for a particular thing. I mean, we as humans, we're human beings. We're not humans doing, right? Although we are that too, but, you know, we're constantly changing and evolving and growing, and hopefully. And so I think what's interesting to me is being able to see how people are changing and growing over time. And it gives me hope when I can see my heroes struggle. And there's something encouraging about hearing somebody say, you know, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm really interested in finding out. But I'm not going to fake like I know, I know the answer, because we all know what that's like, you know. Also, to be that person who doesn't know but doesn't want to appear like we know, so we kind of fake it, and we know, like, we walk away going, crap, they totally know I faked that.
I feel like that's the plot of like 90% of movies. Like, it's based on some kind of lie, and then you have to keep it up, and then people figure it out, and then they forgive you anyway, and then that's the end of the movie. Like, that's like so many movies. That's the plot.
Oh yeah.
Well, I want to ask you about, especially now that I've sort of said how much I don't like the inauthentic, like, people, experts, and I'm using air quotes, experts, selling you stuff. Like, I know that you just launched a course that I really am interested in and would love to have you talk a little about. So it's called Story Seller You. And, you know, just to put you on the spot a little bit, which, you know, you should be prepared for, what is it about this course that maybe is unique, or what is it about your course that people need to have versus all the other things that are out there?
Sure. Well, it's a great question. And I almost didn't release it. And in fact, other than emailing my email list a couple times, and I think I've done maybe one Facebook post, I haven't marketed it at all. Matter of fact, I've capped it at 25 people.
Wow.
And you know, as of right now, there are 20, I think, in it. And because what I wanted to do was I wanted to, in one place, kind of curate the being part and the doing part. So it's not a full-on tactical, you know, here are the 5 steps to getting 1 million followers. It's actually divided up into like 4 sections. And the first 2 are really all about getting the operating system straight. So, like, really clarifying, you know, purpose and really why do you want this? And, you know, working through the product and the plan and really getting clarity on those issues, and then how to connect. Like, we live in a connections economy. So what does that look like? So I spend a lot of time on that, because if you don't get those things right, it doesn't matter what tactics you use. It doesn't matter, you know, what email tools you use or what strategies you use to create blog posts. If you don't really know why you're doing it and have a really strong grounding in why this matters and where am I going and why am I going in that direction, like all of the other stuff, it's going to fall apart. And this is why, you know, every time I speak at a writers conference, you know, I'll ask people, how many here, you know, are aspiring writers? You know, everybody raises their hand. How many have been an aspiring writer for 5 years or more? And everybody raises their hand. And then I ask, how many of you have actually completed a book? Usually it's like 2 people out of 100.
Wow. And
5 at most. And, you know, it's usually because, like, we want to jump ahead. Like, we don't really want to do the work. I would call it the soul level work, where you're trying to figure out what kind of, you know, is this really soul level work for me? Or am I just chasing the hot, shiny thing? Do I just want to get on a bestseller list? So that's what's different about what I'm doing is I've kind of taken all of the stupid mistakes I've made and the wrong ways of thinking and flipped them upside down. And the things that I've learned by working with people that are way more successful than I am in terms of sales and, reach. So it's kind of like the anti-course, because my hope is that after the first 2 modules, half the people will quit. because they'll realize, yeah, you know what? I'm doing this for the wrong reason, or this isn't really for me. Because I want to help people, if this isn't really what you're made to do, then go ahead and uncover that, because, there's something else for you. And then if it is for you, then, okay, let's talk about what that looks like on a daily basis, let's build your overnight success over the next 10 years. And here are the key principles that you're going to need. And you're going to have to execute on them, and you're going to have to develop the craft and the discipline of just digging away at the mountain. It's kind of like, trying to tunnel through Mount Everest with a plastic spoon. So, but you can do it. That's kind of the magic of it. You can do it. You just have to really stick at it over time. And so that's kind of what the course is about.
Well, that sounds great. And I like the kind of pairing of the practical with the sort of inspirational, because I feel like it's, that's kind of my pet peeve is when I go to a conference or somewhere and there's too much motivational speak without enough practical speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I sit there and I heckle in my mind a little bit because everybody gets inspired and then they just go home, and nobody does anything. And so I think that, it's clear from the conversation we've had and some of the things that you've had to say about all of these ideas that you have so much knowledge and clearly have worked with people in a practical way as well. So I feel like that would be such a great value. So I'll make sure to leave the link to that in the show notes. And since, if there's only 5 spots left, if those are filled, people can sign up for your email list if you do a second running of this. That would be great for people to get in on. Well, I like to end every interview asking what is inspiring you this week. And it doesn't have to be some kind of highbrow thing. It can, it can be ramen noodles, because sometimes I'm really inspired by food, even cheap food, but whatever it is for you this week, what's inspiring you right now?
Well, okay. So I'll give you 2 things. The first one is, so I live in Nashville and it's been really hot here. So I have a 10-year-old daughter, and we love to put the sprinkler underneath our trampoline.
Awesome.
And we'll go out and jump on the trampoline with the sprinkler going. So it's awesome. So that was really fun. That's kind of an inspiring moment. But I also came across a book this week called Powers of Two. It's by Joshua Wolfshenk, Schenk, Powers of Two. And it's all about how relationships drive creativity, and how this sort of cultural colossus idea of the lone creative genius, we all know that it's not really true. Yeah. But he talks about how the greatest creative ideas come out of creative pairs, and it's people coming together and sharpening each other, iron sharpening iron kind of thing. And it's been a real encouragement to me this week, and it's definitely it's a great book, especially if you're a creative type and somebody who likes to collaborate with other people. And even if you don't like to collaborate with other people, it'll give you some really interesting insight into how the creative process seems to work. So it's really great.
I'm going to definitely have to pick that up, because I was just listening to Cliff Ravenscraft's. I can't say his name right now. His podcast, an older one, talking about mastermind groups, and he was kind of quoting the first person to talk about mastermind groups, whose name escapes me right now, but so sort of put that label on it, and it was groups of 2. And what it was that sort of where the idea of this mastermind group that people, such a phrase that people coin right now, has come from, was sort of this pairing of creative minds and what they could do together that they couldn't do alone. So I'm definitely going to have to pick that up, and I'll link to that in the show notes as well. But jumping on the sprinkler or jumping on the trampoline with the sprinkler. Jumping on the sprinkler would be just a really quick thing, because it would be gone. Awesome. But jumping on the trampoline with the sprinkler sounds great. I feel like that would make some really good pictures as well. I think I've got some good pictures of my kids. We haven't put it under, but we've put it like a hose nearby, like kind of above coming in. And I got some really neat pictures that way. But
oh, awesome. Well, can I give you one more?
Sure. We'll take 3. Okay. That's great.
So there's one more, and I actually wrote this really short essay about it. There's this concept in Chinese culture called Wu Wei. And Wu Wei translated just means non-action, action through non-action. And the way I describe it is that it's like the ocean. And the ocean is, covers 71% of our planet. So some people might argue that it actually is the planet. So it's this, greatest body of water. But the only reason the ocean is the greatest body of water is because it's the lowest. And it doesn't have to convince the streams to flow into the rivers or the rivers to flow into the ocean. It simply has to be lower than everything else. And so it's kind of allowing things into it. And that's what makes it great. And something happens once, fresh water enters salt water, which is poison to us. You can't drink it, that it evaporates and it goes up into the clouds and it comes back as rain and grows the peas and the radishes in my backyard. But it all comes down to like this idea of just kind of allow, don't fight life. Nobody knows where the wind comes from or grows. We don't know how the flowers grow, but, look at them. Not even Solomon was dressed like one of these. So relax, Wu Wei.
I like that. What's funny is I think in the exact same podcast episode, Cliff talked about that idea as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I feel like I'm getting, I talk to all these people and I'm listening to all these things, and it's interesting to me how without forcing, they all kind of come together. So
yeah.
Apparently I needed to hear this week. So maybe some other people did as well.
Well, there you go. Wu Wei.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Kevin, for taking the time to I feel like we kind of had this really rambly conversation that was, really inspiring to me and hopefully to other people. But thank you again for taking the time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. And if for no other reason, it was just you and me, that's cool. This was fun.
Definitely. Okay, who's ready to get all Wu Wei on their art? I don't think that's really the way that Wu Wei works, but in any case, I came out of this interview really just motivated to kind of get down and dirty with the things that I'm passionate about. So I'd love to hear about what you're working on and what inspired you from this interview. So if you're in the Facebook group, come leave a message and we'll talk about this in a thread there. You can also leave a comment in the show notes at creativewriting.com. Thanks for listening.